Welcome again, because I see some new faces on World Women Davos Agenda 2024, and we are all part of it. And as Prime Minister Helen Clark said, we need networking, we need support each other, that's why we're here. And now there will be a conversation about women and media. And media is something that we are all expert of, because you are whether using it or creating it, and a topic that is very close to my heart as a journalist. Okay, so let me introduce the amazing experts that we managed to gather here today. And so starting from maybe left, Diane Brady, Assistant Manager, Editor, Forbes, US. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Annabella Bassler, CFO Ringier, founder of Equal Voice Initiative. Hello. Maneet Ahuja, editor-at-large, founder of Iconoclast and Forbes also. Hello. Lalita Taylor, executive producer, BBC, also co-chair of BBC Women in STEM. Hello. And last but not least, please introduce yourself, because I don't have your name.
So I'm so sorry, my voice, Davos voice has been pitching. So, AbuSulayman, American Saudi. I work in the media. I used to host the #1 TV show in the Arab world for 17 years called Softly Speaking for Women.
How relevant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, guys. The situation in media is not perfect. It's very far from perfect. And I live and I work in media, Polish and international, for like almost 30 years now. I give you some numbers. And according to Global Media Monitoring Project, only 24% women can tell something in the news in media globally. So we only have 24 female voices in news media. I don't have to tell you that there are more than 50% of women in society. And in US, there are 27 female CEOs, 27% of female CEOs, but only 11% of women CEOs in Google Images. So when you Google CEO, what you see is men. Not surprisingly. Women appear in 25% of Google search results for author, yeah? So you write something, a story, or you write an article, or you write a PhD diploma stuff. So 25, and in reality, we women constitute in US 56 of American authors. So only 25 out of 56. So the situation is not really perfect, it's far from it. I would start with Annabelle, because we know each other, I won't hide it. And we've talked about it many times for the last couple of years. As a manager of big media company, do you see those numbers every day as a media company also?
Ola, thanks a lot. And we totally see those numbers, because when Equal Voice started 4 years ago, we exactly wanted to measure it. Because me as a CFO, you can imagine that I love numbers. So I wanted to understand the data behind it. And this was the moment that we at Ringier we established an AI algorithm that we built it up in-house that was reviewed by the ETH in order to measure it real time, how often women and men are shown in text, pictures, video, and audio. And it's so interesting because the first talks I had with the editors-in-chiefs, everybody would say, no, we are okay, we are better than the average. But indeed, we weren't at all. For Handelszeitung is the biggest business newspaper here in Switzerland, we were with 17%. Now, after 4 years, we are reaching 30%. So I couldn't agree more. It's so important to measure it, because measuring it, it makes it more aware.
Okay, Diane, you're part of the Forbes family, also very business-oriented stories. We see a lot of female entrepreneurs here and founders and brilliant experts. But do you also agree from your experience that media do not cover female stories and female voices in a way that reality is, the presence is?
I have a lot of opinions about that. Hi, everybody. I'm wearing my hat because it freed up a seat. So there you go. I think women engage with media differently. It's always been a very important thing for me to bring new voices to the table. I think there is this mini-me syndrome, I call it, which is to recognize excellence in a form that reminds you of yourself. So when you have male leaders in a newsroom or any other where it's like, in the abstract, they want to, when they start to say, oh, you remind me of me at 23, 33, 43. And so one of the things I've always done is, much like you do on a panel, you say, if you're quoting economists, where's the female economist? I have very mixed feelings about identifying as a woman, first woman this, first woman that. I think it's a Faustian pact, because the way we cover women, anybody who's been covered by the media in here, we tend to cover your fertility and footwear in the first paragraph, and who needs that, right? So I think we have to cover women differently. We have to integrate them into our coverage so you can be what you can see. And then I think with regard to changing the dynamic, I think we have to tread carefully about when we celebrate gender as the starting point for a story.
Interesting. Maneet, question for you, because you know, I was telling with Prime Minister Clark that during pandemic we have a backlash, and we see it also in, for example, Polish TV, because we were measuring it, and when we compare year to year before pandemic and after pandemic, we saw less women experts on TV. When I asked the TV director why, and we published the story on Forbes, they say, oh, you know, because there is an economical crisis. And there are male experts on economy. And the same with war in Ukraine going on, we cover a lot of war, so there are no female experts on war. So how would you comment that there are no female experts?
No, I mean, I think that is a fallacy. I think that there are incredible female economists and financial leaders. And so, you know, first I do have to give kudos to Diane. Diane and I work very closely together at Forbes across the spectrum. We are sharing a flat, yeah. But from the perspective of covering Wall Street and global business and founding a Wall Street and global financial conference, I specifically looked into this issue, and my previous background at CNBC, we on purpose would make sure that every segment, as much as possible, would have a leading female voice. I mean, there are Dambisa Moyo is one of the world's top economists. She's here at the World Economic Forum today, and now she's even in the House of Lords. So there's Mary Erdos, and there's our financial leaders that have a big global perspective on the macroeconomy. It doesn't matter if their title is economist. If they're leading global banks, Ida Liu, CEO of Citi Private Bank, who's to say she does, you know, would anybody say she doesn't have a global perspective on the economy? So I think, you know, specifically with Iconoclast, we work to feature at least 50% female speakers and business leaders. So I think that these women are prominent in their industries, they're prominent in the world, and I think, you know, in media, we just need to do a better job of digging and doing our research, and, you know, that's on us.
Thank you, thank you. Now going to Lalita from BBC, and I'm so happy to have you, because the BBC is like a, you know, role model for good journalism around the globe, and it reaches so many people. It has such a big reach. And in your organization, there is a huge, like a very positive story. Actually, this is why I'm so happy having you here, because you started in 2017 a project that is called 50/50 Initiative. Tell us about the beginning and where are you now with it and what you achieved to do globally.
Well, I have to apologise. I'm actually softly spoken today, so joining you. So I am. I've been at the BBC for 35 years, and I have seen it change and evolve so much. When I joined the BBC, I was one of 2 Indian women in the newsroom, and now there is such a diversity. And I think that representation behind the scenes in the workforce is as important as on the screen. And so coming back to the 50/50 project, it started 7 years ago, and I know the amazing man who started it, Ross Askins. And basically, we have always been told in the newsroom to always make sure that we balance our guests on each panel. And so he decided, why not actually record it? And I think, as my panelist member said, the figures don't lie. And I think when you collate the figures, you can really see a culture change. And that's so important. And so the 50/50 project started with simply recording the number of women on screen. And then the data was shared around other news outlets. And that sort of created engagement and encouragement. And it's about getting new voices on and representation. And so what has it achieved? Well, the recent figures show that 60% of we have 60% external partners who've joined the scheme, and they have said that they've seen 75% improvement in the gender representation since they joined. So the next steps, well, it's equality in all areas, and we're all really, really challenged, and it's bringing our staff networks involved in it as well. So we are working with 50/50 projects in areas such as disability. The figure that the BBC has is 10%. At the moment, we are getting there. We're not close, but there's lots of work that's being done. And I, as co-chair of BBC Wisdom, I'm really challenged that I want to create a pipeline of STEM women in science, tech, and engineering and maths to come into the BBC. And you know, we've already started a database, so we will have speakers in that database so that journalists can refer to that database to bring new speakers on. So I would set a challengeable to you as well, saying, why don't you connect me on LinkedIn and put, you know, the science and STEM database, and I could recommend you and add you on. So I'm going to fly my flag and do a little bit too.
Thank you. That's great. That's really great. You know, this is the story that the things are changing, are starting to change in media, and why it's so important. I want to, like, you probably know, but I want to say it loud. Media has a huge impact on societies and how people think and how people perceive male and female, how they attach roles to them. And so, example, in news, usually, traditionally, even 10 years ago, we could see men talking and experts, professors about economy, politics, and war, for example, and geopolitics. And female experts or voices were asked about children and healthcare and stuff like, for example, we have an inflation, and there is, you know, so-called voice pop. So a reporter comes to a lady and says, what is the price of the, I don't know, potatoes? And she said, oh my God, it's so high, and we can't live with these prices, yeah? So she is like a voice of society, a person who has a problem with it. And then comes a professor who says what inflation is, in one way, explains the world. So man explains the world to us. And we want to change it having female voices. And you are not a person who, an anchor, running your own show, your program on TV. How does it, you feel that your presence changes the perception of women in your society?
Sorry. Before I speak about my society, I wanted to talk about, there's 2 different types of female representation, and white women and also women of color. So every problem you've seen, and people have talked so eloquently about representation, you multiply that by 100 when you bring in a woman of color on. And thank you. One of the issues that we have seen is that the majority of representation for women from the global south is as victims. And that dehumanizes them, even within the female spectrum, even within the female empowerment movement. And for example, we have today with us Seema, one of the most important investors in the Middle East, somebody who is from India but also lives in Dubai, so straddles a lot of the different places in the world. Very few times would you see her on TV versus somebody who doesn't have a light or who doesn't have heat or is struggling with some agriculture or something from Africa or from India or from the Middle East. And so we also have to be very cognizant of when we pull up women, we pull up all women, not just people who look like us. And so we fall into the same representational biases that men have done against women. So this is extremely important message that I think so many people in this room would be able to carry on. I loved what Helen Clark talked about, saying that you have to be in a position to make the change. It's very difficult to be in those positions. And the women in these rooms that we are at Davos are women in positions to make small changes, to ensure that real representation of women occurs on every level that we have power over. Regarding my own TV show, it's very similar to The View. It's for women. And when we first started, I was also producer. People thought we were going to be doing cooking shows. And we're going to bring in the starlets and talk about shoes, which, by the way, I'm going to say, I don't want to knock it, because sometimes you look at somebody, you're like, I wonder where her shoes are from, right? So it is, fashion is part of our love of life. But we wanted to really show the entrepreneurs and the decision makers, and to enable the little girls watching us. When we're a family show geared towards women, but we actually had 52% males watching. And that was a very interesting statistic. And so we dug deep into that. And when we did it, and across the board from Morocco all the way to Iraq, men would say, I listened to you guys, and we had a different representation. We had somebody in her 70s, single, divorced, remarried, widowed, we just had a lot of representation within the anchors from different countries. Lebanon, Egypt, Palestine, and Saudi Arabia. And they would say, because our wives tell us stuff, or our moms, but until you girls say it, we think they're just nagging us. So we were providing a neutral voice for women, for these men to listen to without feeling like their masculinity was being attacked at home. And we consciously brought in the plentiful, amazing stories of success and achievement, whether from underprivileged backgrounds, which exist, but also from normal, middle-class, unprivileged backgrounds of people who are able to make it. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a challenge. You will need all the representations, because you never know who's watching and who needs that message.
Thank you. That was very, very important what you just said. We still have like 8 or 9 minutes, and I want to tackle another topic that we discussed before, which is technology. And in the big Davos, up there where the leaders are meeting, the AI and applying technology to all businesses is a huge thing now. But technology is also in the media, and it influences our media globally, which is not always in the best way, in the sense that media create, fake news and bubbles and biases, and also, this polarization in society that has never been so strong. But also, there are positive examples. So I would like you to ask you to share your thoughts about the technology and how you perceive it in a sense of equality, but also the job you do. So Diane, please.
Thank you. I think, well, this is the theme of Davos right now is trust. I've spent a lot of my career in other parts of the world, I think especially in covering women. I think when we meet face to face, we build more trust. To the same point, I think how we've covered women erodes trust. So my concern is if we don't allow ourselves to have that human connection and meet face to face, there's no substitute for it, because I think the stakes are higher for women when they're covered, which means we have to earn trust as media. And one of the things I am concerned about with deep fake and obviously trust barometers, if people don't believe that we have the truth as our starting point and that our goal is to make people smarter, not to rip them down. So that's my biggest concern, is I think as trust erodes in media and elsewhere, it becomes harder to cover people who've been marginalized and not had a voice already. So I think we have to make an extra effort.
Thank you, Annabelle. You are an expert also in algorithms. So tell me, are you like looking positively on this change with AI going very quickly into our lives?
Well, with our algorithm, we are happy. We can reach already 50 million users. We are present in 7 countries with 32 publications. And we will have a little guide, because we just published a book about criteria, about a design concept for journalists, how to apply equal voice in your media companies, but as well in your companies, because it's all about leadership. But back to the AI, I think we all have to be aware that the unconscious bias that we see in AI is even worse than we see in media, because it learns from itself, right? So it totally depends how it's fed. And if you have a look, we did like a little experiment, and we asked Midjourney to prompt a CEO. And Midjourney seems to believe that in 98% of the cases, the CEO is man. In 99%, it's a white man. In regards to a businesswoman, in 100%, she is young. In 95%, she is wearing something open. And in 56%, she has a sexy posture. And now comes the worst. I guess all of you know Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger is never the victim, but always the hero. We tried to prompt it that he would be saved by firemen, but no way he is the hero. So why am I pointing out those examples? Because I'm totally convinced it's all of us who are needed in order to ensure that the sources of AI are the right one, and we have to step in now.
Okay, let's speed it up. Yeah.
So I totally agree with what my colleagues have just said, but to just layer in a different perspective, I mean, obviously this is a very complicated topic. It's the whole, undercurrent of Davos and rebuilding trust. I do think it is a fact all organizations are actively contemplating and integrating, figuring out how to integrate AI. I think with media, it's particularly complicated because we're already having, a crisis in trust in the media across the spectrum. However, the positives are there in that it greatly increases our distribution. And so I think that, as long as journalistic standards and we can collectively figure it out just the way that other industries are looking at, like big tech and healthcare. I moderated a panel on healthcare. If there are governance rules that are put in place, hopefully it can be used towards more of an advantage than a detriment.
Thank you. So the positive note. We were talking before the panel. So what do you stand for? Is in a question about how the technology impacts equality.
I think technology is a game changer, and I'm always very positive about it. I think, like all the members of the panel have said, that AI does have biases, and it will multiply. It will create new kinds of jobs, and I think there's fears about how people will fit into that. But I think we've heard of all that already. But I think, you know, what I'm seeing, which is also quite worrying, is, for example, in Spotify, they're recording the presenters' voices, and the presenters don't actually have to even be there, and the voices are being used to introduce things. And that kind of implication of your ownership of your own assets and who you are and your voice does lead to some questions. But at the same time, I heard something really positive about, you know, I'm really passionate about women in rural parts accessing knowledge. And, you know, AI is going to be such a, you know, could be a game changer for them in that, you know, they can use ChatGPT for Q&As, they can use YouTube to watch videos, they can, you know, it's kind of creating access, and knowledge will be available in such an interesting way. So it's really exciting. But at the same time, it's being mindful and interrogating it, and not everything you will see, even though it's presented so confidently, is going to be
super
true.
positive, yeah. And the last panelist, but you know, I wanted to add something to what you just said. Everybody who is really looking closely at AI says, okay, it will make our work different. So meaning that some part of our work will be done by algorithms or programs or a software that is, you know, exchanging our repetitive or part of the work. So part of people, many people, millions of people would basically lose the jobs, and part of them, big part of them, will be female. So what do you think about it? This huge shift, is it something that we should be worried? Because you mentioned that we shouldn't only think about this privileged women who has power, who are educated, and who has means to learn.
So I'm an investor, I'm an investor in Transform VC, which is a VC in San Francisco that invests in underrepresented communities in deep tech and climate change. And women, of course, are underrepresented, not only within the founders, but also within the amount of money that they get. Everybody knows they only get 2% of all VC money. And so one of the issues that we're dealing with, not only we don't get the money for allowing these women to find the solutions that work for society at large and not just women. Not only do we not have enough women transforming from students of computer science into founders, but also we're having a major crisis in Silicon Valley where DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are being attacked by the very top. And just like about a week ago, there was questioning about some of the issues that were happening, whether I think in Boeing, because they were having they had a diversity push in the past 10 years, and they're saying the problems with the airplanes right now is because of the diversity issue. And so eroding trust in women coming from people who are extremely credible in technology. Technology is the way of the future. If we talk about what journalism was as the fourth estate, technology is that right now. It is, some of these people are more powerful than governments, more powerful than the media. And so we are being attacked from so many different ways. And what other women have noticed, as we've said, even in the US and San Francisco, which are considered more liberal than other places in the world, we're seeing rollback of basic rights for women. And one of the ways that we can do it, we can change that, is major investments. We put our money where our mouth is. We try to put these women in decision-making powers. We create the next Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Sam Altman, who are women, and we allow them to actually become the forces that shape the next D&I, the next future for us.
Thank you. Listen, we just have to finish, although I would love to talk to you, all of you, more. So please, thank you for the super interesting panel, and I hope you will be able to talk in the afterwards later. Thank you again.